Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to part one of today's End of the Civil War book fair in the McGowan Theater, located in the National Archives building in Washington, D.C. I'm Doug Swanson, Visitor Services Manager for the National Archives Museum and producer for the Noontime Lecture Series. Over the course of the day, we'll have three authors discuss various topics dealing with the end of the Civil War. There will be a 30-minute intermission between speakers so that you may be able to go out into the theater lobby, purchase the author's book, and have him sign it. I hope you'll be able to stick around for the day and join us for each segment. You will not be disappointed. Before we invite our first speaker on stage, I'd like to alert you to a few special programs coming your way in the next few weeks. On Monday, April 20th at 7 p.m., Cokie Roberts will be joined by presidential historian Michael Beschloss to discuss Cokie's new book, Capital Dames, The Civil War and the Women of Washington, 1848 to 1868. On April 22nd at noon, William Marble will be on hand to discuss his book, Lincoln's Autocrat, The Life of Edwin Stanton. And finally, on Thursday, April 23rd at 7 p.m., C-SPAN executive and television host Susan Swain will lead a panel discussion about First Ladies, Private Lives, Public Image. To find out more about these programs and our exhibits, please take one of our monthly event calendars, which you'll find in the racks in the theater lobby, or you can visit our website at www.archives.gov/calendar. Our first topic for today is A Finger in Lincoln's Brain, What Modern Science Reveals About Lincoln, His Assassination, and Its Aftermath by E. Lawrence Abel. Ernie, as he likes to be called, is a distinguished faculty professor at Wayne State University in Detroit, where he has been full professor in both the Department of Obstetrics, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and Gynecology and Department of Psychology since 1985. He's also the former director of the Mott Center for Human Growth and Development at Wayne, past president of 2 international science societies, and the author of more than 40 books and over 200 journal articles on science-related topics. Ernie has also had a long-standing interest in the history, especially about the American Civil War, and has relied on his science background to write about drug addiction in the Civil War, nicknames of Civil War generals and how they got them, and the ways in which music shaped Confederate nationalism. So please join me in welcoming Ernie Abel to the National Archives.
Well, good morning. I'd like to first thank the people here at the Archives for putting on this program today, and a special thanks to Doug Swanson for facilitating my appearance here, and also like to thank the McGowan Foundation for underwriting the program. It's a very nice day here in Washington. It's sunny outside. The magnolias are in bloom, just seen the cherry blossoms, and all these people here are in the audience here today. And I can only attribute it to something that you all share with me, and that is a passion for things Lincoln. And as Doug said, I come from a medical school background, and so do we like to think in terms of medical disorders, if you will. And so the fact that we're all here and we're all sharing this particular interest, and it's a consuming interest. It's something like almost an addiction. The more you have it, the more you want it. It's also a contagious type of disorder. Lots of people have it. Look at all the people here. If you go down on at Ford's Theater, you'll see people lined up half hour after half hour. A lot of people have this particular, I'm being told to stay over here. I like to wander, but okay. So a lot of people have this, I sort of want of a better term, I call this Lincolnitis. So we all share this particular passion for all things Lincoln. And just to give you an example of how deep, how widespread this is just an example of some of the covers of the more than 15,000 books that have been written about Lincoln. And if you have the time and you go wander by Ford's Theater and go across the street to the Education Center, you'll see this tower of books all about Lincoln, various aspects of Lincoln's life, reaching 34 feet high, 8.5 feet across. When I first saw this a couple of years ago, my first inclination, I looked at these books, and they were books that I'd always wanted to read, and I saw one, I was just about to go and grab one, and then the little man at the back of my head said, "You better not do that, because something's going to come all the way down." Later on that night, just before, in the twilight hours before sleep, I had this image of myself in the tabloid saying that, pulling the book out, and the book's tumbling down in the tabloid. Headline is, "Lincoln throws the book at absent-minded professor." And he puts him in the hospital suffering from heavy learning. Well, it's been said that because there's so many books about Lincoln, you could probably publish and get people to read any book on Lincoln at all, even so far as Lincoln's Doctor's Dog. Well, there are books about Lincoln's Doctor, an older book by Dr. Schultz. It's far-fetched to think that anybody would write a book about Lincoln's Doctor's Dog, right? 2 books have been written about Lincoln's Doctor's Dog. Well, just to have a plug of my own book came out in early January of this year. And I'm not going to be able to talk about all the things in there, but I'm going to sort of focus on things. But what I want to do in terms of focus is just to give you this challenge that was given to writers about 20, 30 years ago, famous writers in America. They were challenged to write a story in 6 words. And many of the famous writers whose names escape me right now, if you get to a certain age and you're a male, and that memory for names is the second thing to go. Writing a story in 6 words, what was the challenge? The winner of this was Ernest Hemingway. And this is his story. Then he writes a 6-word study, For Sale. How do we do the pointer of this?
It's at the top, Ernie.
At the top? There we are. Thank you. So this is the story that Hemingway writes. For sale, baby shoes, never used. Now, there's a whole story right there. And now you can use your own imagination to elaborate that. Who were the parents of this baby? Where did they live? Is this their firstborn? What kind of name did they have for the baby? What happened to the baby? Why didn't, he was able to, or she able to write, wear those shoes? Well, if I asked you to do something similar for Civil War, the assassination, and I sampled everybody here, and then I sampled people on the internet, I think I might come up with something close to what I have on here in 6 words. Disgruntled actor, Freudian slip, shoots Lincoln and alters history. Now, we all know who the disgruntled actor is. It's John Wilkes Booth. But why is he disgruntled? Some people argue he was insane. Some people, part of a conspiracy. Some people, he's just so angry at Lincoln. In the book, I argue that I don't accept the conspiracy theory, but possibly the anger or the insanity or whatever. And I build on that, and I argue that in addition to those particular personality problems that he had, Booth also suffered from syphilis. And I go through a number of pages, and I look at all the different characteristics that Booth had, and look through all the history of syphilis, and show that the diagnosis pertains to him, and with pretty good confidence. I'm not saying that Booth shot Lincoln because he had syphilis, okay? Don't get me wrong. I'm saying that this was something that tipped him over the edge. He already was, ready to do something violent, and now, there are a lot of people who hated Lincoln. Booth isn't the only one. There are people who would have liked to kill Lincoln, but Booth is the guy who does it. So even though there are a lot of people, and thousands of people probably, who wanted to do something to Lincoln, Booth is the guy who does it, and I'm saying one of the reasons that precipitated him was that he suffered from this particular disorder. Actor, Booth comes from a very famous acting family. His father, Junius Bruce Booth, was one of the foremost Shakespearean actors of his day. His brother, Edwin Booth, is also a famous Shakespearean actor. And in fact, talking about sexually transmitted diseases, Edwin Booth had gonorrhea. So this is nothing new that many of the actors and people of those days didn't have sexually transmitted diseases. Shoots Lincoln. I'm going to talk about the shooting part of it in a moment, but just in terms of what happened afterwards. Lincoln is shot. First doctor that comes into the booth, into the presidential box to help him is Charles Leal. He's only had his degree for 6 weeks. He has no battlefield experience. I want to emphasize that. When all these hagiographies about Leal and how great he was, this is a nice guy, but he's got no battlefield experience. He doesn't know how to remove bullets. By the time patients come to his hospital, they've already been treated. He's taking care of them afterwards. Nevertheless, he does what he's been taught to do. He searches for the wound. He's seen Booth with this knife in his hand. He imagines that Lincoln's been stabbed, searches for the wound, can't find any stab wound, searches the head, finds a little hole in the head, sticks his finger in there. Now, he's going to be held to task by a neurosurgeon many, many years later, but in fact, he's doing what he's been taught to do. This is the treatment. Try and find the bullet. That's okay. Don't fault him on that. What you can fault, though, is the doctors who come after him. And being told to wander back here. The doctors who come after him, each one of them, 4 or 5 of them, also stick their finger in Lincoln's brain through that little wound. You can excuse Leal for doing that, but what's the point of these other doctors? What do they think? They got a better finger than Leal? It's almost like today, if you go to a doctor, you're going to get a lot of blood tests. You go to another doctor, he's going to give you the same blood tests because he doesn't believe what the other doctor's results were. Well, these other doctors don't believe that Leal's finger is any good. They want to do their own finger. So they all stick their finger in it. And yeah, you might fault, you can't fault Leal for doing this, but you could sort of fault all these other doctors for exacerbating the injury that occurred. And besides the fingers, they also stick probes in and fiddle around in the brain and move bones and stuff like that. If Lincoln ever had a chance of surviving, which probably didn't, they doomed him. There was no chance after they got through with him. Nothing to do with the disease, by the way, having to do with exacerbating the wound. Well, after Lincoln dies, they bring him to the White House and do an autopsy, and they remove Lincoln's brain, look for the wound. But, you know, nobody's ever thought, what happened to the brain after? Did they put it back in the body? Did they throw it in the trash can? Nobody ever said what they did to that brain. So we don't really know. We assume maybe they put it back and the undertaker sewed it in. Could be. If you remember the scene in The Godfather, I'm sure nearly everybody here has probably seen The Godfather. There's a scene in which Sonny Corleone gets shot up. He's wounded, 100 shots, and his body is really fragmented. The Godfather goes to the undertaker, who owes him a favor, and he says, I want you to dress the body up for his mother. I want him to look good. Okay, so it's going to be presented. Well, when it comes time for Lincoln to go on display, Secretary Stanton says, no, just the opposite. I don't want him dressed up. I want him to show the discoloration of the wound. And what he wants to do is he wants to increase the horror of the thousands of millions of people who are going to be looking at that body, because he wants to, as part of the radical republicanism, to be able to pursue these harsh punitive policies that they want to instrument, and by getting public opinion on their side, this is one of the ways of doing it. Well, just another part of the story, Lincoln goes on this 16,000-mile journey towards Springfield, and he's not buried permanently until many, many years later. In fact, they remove his remains 17 times before he's finally buried. And one of the interesting and ironic things is that before Booth actually planned to kill Lincoln, he planned to kidnap him and hold him for ransom. Before Lincoln is permanently buried, a number of Counterfeiters want to do the same thing. They want to steal Lincoln's body and hold it for ransom so that they can redeem him for what? To release their engraver. They're counterfeiters. The engraver's been arrested. They think that they're going to, I keep moving over here. They think that by holding Lincoln's body for ransom, they'll be able to barter him for the release of their engraver, and so that they will be able to release him, start printing counterfeit notes. So another part of the irony about that. Now the final thing about altering history. What would happen if Lincoln hadn't been killed? Okay, would things have been different? Would construction policies been much more lenient? Would we have different kind of race relations than we had? What was the effect of the assassination? As I said, have harsh implementation of policies. You can write all kinds of stories about that aspect too. What I want to do today, however, is talk about the crime scene. I want to do a crime scene investigation for you, if you will. We're going to play CSI like you probably see it on television. Okay? Before I do, though, let me just give you a setting, context. This is April 1865. It's 4 years into a bloody conflict, the most bloody conflict that America has ever witnessed. Approximately 2.5% of the population, 750,000 men died. That's about 2.5% of the population. In today's numbers of population, it would be about 8 million men who get killed in the war, okay, on both sides. That's not including the people who are wounded, property damage, the rapes that went on. A tremendous, tremendous bloodbath. Well, comes April 9th, 1865, the war is finally coming to a close. General Lee surrenders the Army of Northern Virginia. For all intents and purposes, the war is over. There's still pockets of resistance in North Carolina and Alabama and out west, but by and large, the war is over. People are in a mood to celebrate. Guns are being fired. People are singing, all kinds of illuminations. The North, and when I say celebration, I'm talking mainly about the North, of course. People haven't smiled for 4 years. Now they can smile again. They're going to have dances, singing, like I said. And over in the White House, Mary is in a happy mood, and Lincoln's in a happy mood also. And they're in a mood to celebrate. Mary's received an invitation the day before from Grover's Theater, the National Theater, to come to the theater, but she's heard that Laura Keene is at Ford's Theater. Laura Keene, very famous actress. This is going to be her last night at Ford's Theater, An American Cousin. It's a comedy, lighthearted. Turns to Lincoln, says, "Mr. Lincoln," or should say father. She calls him father. He calls her mother. Would you rather go? I'd rather go to Ford's Theater. Is that okay? I can assure you his answer is not whatever. He says yes. Okay. So Mary sends a message to Harry Ford over at Ford's Theater saying, "Please reserve the presidential box for us. And by the way, I've also invited General Grant and his wife, and they're going to be coming." Well, Harry Ford's ecstatic. This is Good Friday. Terrible night for the theater. Doesn't expect many people to be there. But now, with Grant and Lincoln both going to be in attendance, he's expecting a big turnout. So he's ecstatic. Tells his people, remove the barrier between the boxes 7 and 8, the presidential box and the one beside it, to make a big box. And he sends this message out to the newspapers to advertise it, so everybody knows that Grant is going to be there with Lincoln. And please notice, Grant's name comes first. People have seen Lincoln every day. Hardly anybody has seen Grant. So people are very, very curious. He's going to be the big draw. Okay, so they've got this going. They're expecting Grant to be there. Comes the day of the show, Grant backs out. In the afternoon, he says, "I'm sorry, I didn't realize we made other plans." Well, the reason we made other plans is because Julia Grant can't stand to be with Mary. A lot of people can't stand to be with Mary. She's a difficult person to be with sometimes. And so she says, under no circumstance am I going, make up some excuse. He does. We've got to go see our daughter on Easter Sunday. So they're not going to be there. Well, Lincoln asked a number of other people if they want to come to the theater with them, and they all turn him down. At the last minute, Mary invites Clara Harris, a young lady that she's befriended and on good terms with her, and her fiancé, Major Henry Rathbone. Would you like to come? And at the last minute, they say, yeah, we'll be happy to come. They pick them up on the way from the White House. They go to Harris's house. Ira Harris is the senator, father of Clara. Pick them up. They come, and they arrive around 9 o'clock to Ford's Theater. If you've been to Ford's Theater, you'll recognize this staircase. Come out, you come up this winding staircase, and it leads you to the second floor, or what's called the dress circle. And this is just a picture of the interior. Lincoln thinks he's going to walk into the presidential box, which is right over here, without anybody noticing him. Well, it's impossible. The man is 6'4", towers above everybody, wears that iconic stovepipe hat. He's dressed in black. Somebody is going to see him. They do. They start clapping. Everybody turns. Where's the clapping coming from? They see him. They start clapping. It's the cue for the orchestra to break into hail to the chief. Lincoln acknowledges them. Thank you, thank you. And then they continue on to this area here. And they come to this area here, which is called a passageway into the presidential box. The hallway, vestibule, sometimes called. It's about 10 feet long, 4 feet wide. There is a door to it, which is not, the latch on it is broken. Booth is going to take advantage of that later on. This is the door over here to box 7. There's usually a lock on both of these doors. Not for security. It's for privacy, because Lincoln's not the only one who ever uses this box. The other people who come there don't need security, but they need privacy, because sometimes people burst in on them. So there's locks on the door to keep people out. The door, this lock is working. You can't get in here. This one isn't, and so Lincoln and his party are going to go through this particular door, the door to box 8. And this is what the interior looks like. This is where Lincoln is going to sit in this rocking chair. This is a facsimile. Original is down in Detroit at the Ford Museum down there. Mary's going to sit beside him over here. Clara Harris is going to sit over here, and Major Rathbone's going to sit over here. You really can't see, and I'll show you a schematic of it, but this is not aligned with a wall like here. The wall goes over here. It's angled. In order for Rathbone to see the stage, he has to sit right over here in the corner. And he can't see the stage looking like that. He has to pivot. So he's pivot, and his back is to the door that leads to the box 8. So the door to box 8 is right behind him. This just shows you another way of looking at it. Lincoln's over here, Mary's here, Clara Harris is here, and Rathbone, I took the picture from the other one that I showed you. I'm not good enough with Photoshop, so I couldn't put him over here, but he's sitting over here. So you get the general orientation of where everybody's sitting. And this is just a schematic, just to show you again. So here's the vestibule. The door over here is locked. This is the door to box 8, which is open. They go through here. President sits over here. Mrs. Lincoln's over here. Clara Harris is here. And because of this sofa angled over here, Rathbone is sitting over there. So you sort of get the orientation. Well, play goes on, and Mary's getting a little close to Lincoln, and she says, "What's Clara Harris going to say about me holding on to you like this?" And Lincoln says, "She won't think anything about it." And these are Lincoln's last words. Okay? Right about now, a little bit after his last words, Booth enters the vestibule. He's been up there earlier that day. He has cut a notch into the door to the vestibule where that lock usually is, and he's cut a notch, and he's brought a bar with him so he can bar the entry to the box. He doesn't want anybody coming in there once he's in there. Earlier that day, he has bored a little hole through here. And there's a little bit of dispute whether or not he made the hole or whether or not the Fords made the hole. Idea the Fords made the hole to see where Lincoln's sitting so they know where he is. Doesn't make any sense. The Fords know where Lincoln is, and if they want to come in there, they could come in there any time. Booth's belongings, when it's his room is searched later on, there's a gimlet in there, and it's the same size of making the hole. So Booth has made this hole over here. He knows, again, he's been here many times for Theater. He knows the latch to this door is broken. Okay, so got the setting. Okay. Now, Booth has been in this play, Our American Cousin, at least 12 times that we know about. He's also been in rehearsals, so he knows exactly when lines are coming. Okay? Now, earlier that day, I forgot to say, this is an important point, that although Grant has been advertised to be at the theater, he's left, as I said before. And Booth has actually seen him leaving. He's been on his horse, and as Grant is going towards the railway station, somebody says, "Isn't that Grant?" And Booth happens to be on his horse, and he dashes alongside the carriage. He looks in, and there's Grant. He knows Grant is not going to be there. Okay? So he assumes that Lincoln is going to be there only with Mary. And he's looked through that hole. And that's a very narrow hole. It doesn't show you what's on the side. It just shows you in front. He's seen Lincoln looking through the hole. He knows where Lincoln's sitting. He knows where Mary's sitting. He doesn't know there's somebody else in the booth. Very important. Now, as I said, he's been in this play for many times. He knows all the lines. He knows, perfect timing, when to coincide his shot with the big laugh line, the big punch line of this play. He wants to do that to cover up the shot. So nobody will hear it. He can have time to make his escape. So he's going to time his shot. And on stage, Mrs. Murchison, having learned that character Asa Trenchard, an American, is a fraud, scolds him, not knowing the manners of good society, and she storms off the stage. And Asa Trenchard says, "Don't know the manners of good society," and then says this line, and everybody, whoever makes this presentation, points out that nobody knows why this is such a laugh line. But apparently it is. It's a big punchline of the play, and everybody, if you were here in the 19th century, 1865, you'd all burst out laughing because this would make you go crazy. So Booth is timed the shot right at that big, 1,700 people in the audience. It's going to drown out the shot. What happens? Everybody hears the shot. He's timed it, but they hear the shot in the orchestra level down below. They hear it on the same level as where Lincoln is sitting. They hear the shot at the back of the stage. They hear it in the lobby. Everybody heard the shot. Why is his timing off? This is an actor, as I say, he's been in this play at least 12 times. He knows all the lines. He knows when the big laugh comes. He's an actor. Timing is everything. This is what he makes his profession on. He has to have exact timing. He's timed himself. He's come back and forth into the theater. He's waiting for that exact moment. He enters through the door. And what happens? He's not expecting anybody to be there. And he sees this guy with his back turned. What would you do if you were Booth at this particular moment? You're not prepared for anybody to be there. You're going to go shoot Lincoln, and you see somebody there. Well, your next thought is there anybody else here that's going to stop me? And he misses the cue. And that's why you hear the shot. Because there's a pause for him to momentarily be distracted. Then he takes his shot. Takes the shot. At that moment, as soon as Rathbone hears it, turns around, sees him, charges. Booth has got a knife in his hand. He slashes. Rathbone's arm is cut. What would you do if it were you? You'd back off. Gives him a second, gives Booth the amount of time he needs to get to the railing. He's just about to jump over that railing. He's done this kind of, It's about a 12-foot high. If you've been to Ford Theater, it's about 12 feet high. He's done this before. He's a very athletic kind of guy. He knows how to make these big, long leaps without injuring himself. But out of the corner of his eye, he sees Rathbone coming at him. This throws his timing off, his balance off. He catches his spur in the flag, and he lands awkwardly on the stage. And he breaks the fibula, the lower bone, the small bone in the lower leg. There's a little bit of disagreement whether or not he broke it there or a horse broke it later on. I'm thinking, for all the evidence that's available, that he broke it on the stage. I talked to an orthopedic surgeon whether or not you could, and he's also said to have run off the stage. I asked an orthopedic surgeon that I know whether or not this is possible, and he points out that, yeah, a lot of people can in fact do this, but even more so with Booth because he was wearing these tight boots, and they acted like a cast. It held his leg in. And plus, he's got all this adrenaline rushing through him. So he rushes off the stage. Okay, and here he is. He lands here, and he shouts, "Sic semper tyrannis," thus always a tyrant, runs off the stage, gets through the back door, and he's off through Baptist Alley. Okay, that's the stage. Okay, now let's do a little bit, play crime scene investigators. We're all going to be criminalists here. 3 questions you want to ask yourself if you're in this kind of business. Where was Booth standing when he shot Lincoln? What was Lincoln doing? And a very important piece of evidence, what's the nature of the wound? And this is going to be critical. Okay. If you're a scientist, you follow the ABCs. Assume nothing. Believe nothing. Check all the facts. Okay? Let's start then with, we're not going to assume anything. We're going to just take testimony. Okay? Now, before I do that, I just want to show you the various scenarios that people have come up with, the illustrators, because they don't know where Lincoln was standing. And all the things, all the testimonies that you hear about where he's standing, nobody really knows from the testimony that, well, I shouldn't say from the testimony. They're basing it on pictures like this. This is Harper's Weekly. The illustrator has Booth shooting Lincoln from his left. If he did that, the bullet would enter his temple and would go in a different direction than we know it did. Courier Knives has Booth standing directly behind him. This is the picture that's influenced more people who've written about Lincoln's assassination than any other picture. They're basing it on this Courier Knives cartoon. And then one from 1909, instead of on his left side or behind, picture depicting it, assassination from the right-hand side. Well, let's look at some of the actual witness testimony. It's a credo of journalists. You check out, you have to have more than one source before you start putting something in print. We have 2 sources about the witness testimony. We have Major Rathbone's testimony. He says he was sitting and the shot came from behind him, not to the side, where it would have come if Booth was standing right behind Lincoln, but behind him, right by the door. He hears the pistol discharge. Down in the orchestra level, the lower level, James Ferguson, who owns a restaurant, a saloon on one side of Ford's Theater and there's a restaurant on the other, he owns that restaurant. He's been told that Grant is going to be in the audience that day. He's a great fan of Grant. He's come not to see the play, not to see Lincoln. He wants to see Grant. As I said before, Grant has rarely been seen in Washington. He's a big fan. Ferguson's a big fan. He goes and he buys a seat way over on the side so he can look up at the presidential box. And he keeps looking up, and he sees, the first time, Lincoln's there, somebody else is there, but it's not Grant. And he keeps looking up. Every couple of minutes, he keeps looking up. He's looking up at that box. And it turns out, at one of the moments that he's looking up, bang, that's when the shot comes. Now, he sees the shot coming from the back of the booth, back of the presidential box. How do you know that? First of all, if you've been to the theater, you know that the presidential box is not lit up. It's dim. Part of the theater, you dim the lights down. You dim the lights down in the presidential box too. It's dark inside there, so he can see the flame coming out of the gun. And it's not coming, he wouldn't be able to see it if it was coming directly behind Lincoln. Lincoln's head would have been covering it up. He's seen the flame coming from the same direction that Major Rathbone said it came from. So we have corroborating evidence of where the shot came from. Forensic evidence. When you fire a gun, that said a little bit of flame. Remember I said he's seen this flame? A little bit of flame comes out of the gun. Very important little piece of forensic evidence. Why? If it were a point-blank shot, like many authors have said, Lincoln's hair would have been singed, would have been burnt. There would have been burn marks. But one of the doctors who examines Lincoln's skull, Lincoln's head afterwards, Dr. Robert Stone, the Lincoln family doctor at the Peterson House, specifically says, not to be a forensic scientist or anybody, makes that comment. The hair or scalp is not in the least burnt. That tells you one thing, eliminates a possibility. It doesn't tell you where he's standing, but it tells you where he wasn't standing. He wasn't standing directly behind Lincoln, that close enough that he would have singed the hair. How far back? We don't know, but at least it's consistent with the other evidence. What about Lincoln? Where is Lincoln when he is shot? Again, we have two pieces of corroborating evidence. One, again from Ferguson. Ferguson's looking up. He says at the moment Lincoln is shot, he's looking down and to the left. Okay. Well, some people have thought that he saw General Burnside in the theater and he's looking to see him. No, Burnside's in New York. We don't know who he's looking at, but we do know he's looking at down and to the left because somebody else in the audience sitting next to a man named Israel Jaquette makes the same comment. Lincoln was looking down. She didn't see him when he was actually shot, but she saw him moments before. Corroborating evidence of what Lincoln was doing at the moment he is shot. The wound location. When the autopsy is performed, the doctor who performs the autopsy, Dr. Woodward, says that the shot went through the bone over the occipital lobe and went into the head. We don't know the direction yet. We'll get to that in a moment. It doesn't go through the cerebellum. This is a part of the brain that controls balance. It doesn't go through the brainstem. If it had gone through the brainstem, Lincoln would have died instantly. This is the part of the brain that controls breathing and heart rate and blood pressure. Had it gone through here, it would have been instantaneous death. No, the bullet goes through this part of the brain here and to the left. Okay? So if you divide the brain halfway here, it's going to come right over here. Now, the next piece of very important evidence. This is crucial. The nature of the wound. Two doctors, actually three, Dr. Taft, I don't have him up here, all state that the wound, the entry wound, is smooth and circular. And one of the other doctors, the doctor I mentioned, Dr. Leal, who when he passes his finger into the wound, he makes a point, perfectly smooth opening. Very critical for the next part of the argument. Okay, so let's summarize the evidence thus far. Shot came from the back of the box. Lincoln's looking down and to his left, and there's a round entry wound. Little science now. Several years ago in the 1990s, Dr. John Latimer, a very famous collector of Lincoln, all things Lincoln, and his collaborator Andrew Laidlaw, performed a number of experiments to try and duplicate the shot. And what Latimer did, or had Laidlaw do, Latimer got some skulls from the morgue, or the equivalent of it at the hospital, human skulls, and he positioned them in various ways so that Laidlaw, when he's shooting at these skulls, they're going to be in different angles, whether or not straight forward or to the left. And he's doing this for an altogether different reason that one I'm going to tell you about, and I'll talk about that later on if you want. But what he wants to do, he wants to duplicate the shot. And what he says is the only way you can get a round, smooth shot, opening wound, is if you directly have your gun in the same direction as which the head is pointing. They're parallel. He knows that Lincoln, he's read all the evidence too, he knows that Lincoln wasn't sitting like this when he was shot. He knows he was sitting like this. And he's made the assumption, as many people have, that Booth was directly behind Lincoln when he shot him. And he said, because of that, all these other doctors who were right there, hours after examining Lincoln, are all wrong. It couldn't have been a round entry wound, because when I did try to duplicate this, we get these sharp edges. Can't have a round wound. Standing behind him, well, as I said, he makes an assumption. He assumed something. And what did he assume? He assumed that Booth was standing directly behind Lincoln. And sure enough, he's on an angle here. You shoot on an angle, you don't get a round entry wound. You get a jagged entry wound. So he's right. You wouldn't do that. But how does he know where Lincoln was standing? He didn't read the other corroborating evidence. I should say Booth standing. Booth is standing, remember, at the back of the presidential box by door 8. And here we have the angle. Now you can get a round entry wound because the gun and the head are parallel. Okay, conclusions. The shot came from the back of the presidential box, from Lincoln's right, not behind him. The shot enters straight on, not on an angle. Enters straight on because this is the shot angle. This is the only way you can get a round entry wound. You can't get a round entry wound in any other way. Now, at the autopsy, there's an argument among doctors. There's always an argument among, you put two doctors together, you get three opinions. Two of the doctors who actually do the autopsy, Dr. Woodward and Dr. Curtis, both say that the bullet went directly forward. Two of the other doctors, Dr. Taft and Surgeon General Barnes, say, no, it went obliquely. The bullet went obliquely on an angle. Who's right? Well, from what I told you, if it were an oblique shot, there wouldn't be a round entry wound, would there? Have to be jagged. One piece of evidence. The second thing is, even if Booth were shooting from back of the presidential box and Lincoln's head was turned so that the wound would go this way, what's Lincoln going to be looking at? He's going to be looking at the wall. He's not going to be looking at anybody. And what's he going to be looking at the wall for? No point at all. So he's looking down, and so the entry wound is a round entry wound. Lincoln is shot from the back of the booth, and from the back of the box by Booth. So this is how the count for the entry wound. So this is a little bit of forensics. Let's go now to some ballistics. Well, we know what kind of gun Lincoln shot. It's either a 45 or a 44 caliber. A little bit disagreement among people who have examined the gun. It shoots a smaller ball, one very mini caliber balls that's going to fit into the muzzle. It's a single shot muzzle loading gun. And in order to take up the space, you put a little patch in it. What we know the gun, we know the bullet. What we don't know is how much powder is in the gun. These guns often come with a little measuring device that allows you to measure exactly how much powder is. There is no such device. Booth doesn't have it when his belongings are searched. He has to estimate. Okay? So he's going to put an estimated amount of powder in the particular gun. We don't know how much. And people who use these kind of guns on a regular basis fire them regularly. At least if you're a gambler, most people who use these kind of guns are people who sometimes are challenged and have to protect themselves. They carry this gun in their pocket. Gamblers often carry them in their pocket. Their life depends on it. They're challenged all the time. You're cheating, whatever. They got to be able to use that gun, and they got to have it being reliable. They can't have it misfire. In order to make it to ensure that it doesn't misfire, they fire the gun every day. Dry out any residual moisture that's in there so that it will ignite and it will shoot. Amount of powder you put in varies. Can be in terms of one kind of measurement, 1 to 2 grams. In terms of bullets, apothecary measurements, 20 to 30 grains. Okay, so how much powder does Booth put in there? Again, Laidlaw does this experiment. Before Dr. Latimer had even fired the gun, Laidlaw determines how much powder you have to load that gun with. He puts let's say, for want of I don't know exactly how much, I don't remember, but let's say he puts 20 grains of powder into the gun, loads it, pushes the bullet into the muzzle, fires from a distance of 6 inches, because that's what everybody assumes, it's a point-blank shot. He fires from a distance of 6 inches. Is that 6 inches? That's how far away he is when he fires. Can't miss, can you? Okay, fires from 6 inches, and he misses from 6 inches away. How's that possible? What would cause him to miss at that particular distance? Think about it, 6 inches away. The answer is the recoil. Watch. Notice how hot that recoil. Shoots that gun, you can be shooting at your particular target, but because of that recoil and because of the short barrel, the recoil causes the gun to shoot upwards. And so that's why Laidlaw misses. So Laidlaw has this experience. He's missed with that shot 6 inches away. What he does, he's going to do it over again. And he loads the gun, and this time he's prepared for that recoil. Same amount, puts the bullet in, 6 inches away, fires, and he hits the target this time. Whoa, great. What happens, though? He's hit the target, but the bullet hasn't got enough velocity to penetrate the skull. He's loaded the gun, he's fired it, the bullets hit the target, but it didn't penetrate. And we know that Lincoln's, Booth's shot penetrates. So he knows he needs to load it with more powder than he has before. So he does that. He loads it with more powder. He's prepared for the recoil. He shoots. This time it hits, and it penetrates. So he's controlled the recoil. He's hit the target, doesn't penetrate. More powder, hits the target, penetrates the target. Okay? So just since the bullet penetrates, has to be a large load of powder, right? Large load of powder means a large recoil. Get to this important point now in a moment. Second point about a Derringer. A terribly inaccurate gun. It's got to be really close. You just saw what 6 inches away. You can miss. Gun is not a gun that's known for target practicing. Let's see if we can get this. Okay. So just an example.
I'm going to try a 5-foot shot at this box here, see what kind of accuracy I get out of it.
This is similar to the gun.
Now he's capping.
Watch. 5 feet away.
You can see I aimed right at the bottom of that black there. And there's my shot right there.
Okay, this is a man who knows a lot about guns and has fired a lot about guns, fired guns many times, similar facsimiles to the gun that Booth has used, and he's missed at a distance of 5 feet because this gun is so inaccurate. How far was Booth standing when he fired? This guy was 5 feet away and missed the target, an experienced gunman. Misses the target. Here, again, is the schematic of the presidential box. So this is where Lincoln's standing. This is 10 feet. The distance from here to here is between 5 and 6 feet, the same distance as that man had when he shot the gun. So about the same distance with as much or as little accuracy as that gun had, and probably even less because Booth's gun's a little even smaller with a shorter barrel. Well, we've heard that Booth was a marksman, right? We've heard all these things. Used to go to shooting galleries. He's really good. He's practiced a lot, but he doesn't practice with a Derringer. He practiced with pistols. And even then, although we've heard he's really a marksman, he's shot in Columbus. He shoots against a target on the wall from a couple of feet away, and he's missed that. Challenges some other guys at the shooting galleries. 2 out of 3 times he gets beaten. He may be a great marksman, but he's still a marksman, if he's a marksman at all, with pistols and not with Derringers. And without practicing, he's not prepared for that recoil, unless he shot that gun a lot of times. And there's only one instance in which he has been said to have used a Derringer. And if you read that, it's after the assassination when the newspapers all have him shooting a Derringer. And the anecdote is he shot this Derringer from a distance of a number of feet, and somebody had their fingers like this, and he shot right between the fingers. Well, that's kind of crazy. Again, a lot of things happen after the shooting to account for things. But he is a marksman, possibly with pistols, but he's not a marksman with a Derringer. Well, let's summarize what we know so far. Gun is inaccurate. He's shooting at a distance of 5 to 6 feet. It's a dimly lit interior. Remember the inside of that presidential box? It's not lit up like it is here. I can see all you. You can't see very well in a very dimly lit interior. The amount of powder he has to use is substantial, causes a large recoil. And he doesn't have a lot of experience that we know about with shooting a Derringer. Put that all together, and we have one of the ironies of history. When Booth enters the box, remember I said he's not prepared for anybody being there. He's suddenly startled by seeing somebody there, takes him off balance a little bit. He has to hurry his shot. And what do you do when you have to hurry your shot? You look at the target. He wants to shoot Lincoln. Lincoln's leaning over. The target is Lincoln's back. That's the target, big target. He's in a hurry. You're going to shoot. Shoots the target at the back. Lincoln's head is a very, very small target. Gun's very inaccurate. He shoots the recoil, shoots for the back, hits Lincoln in the back of the head. It's a bad shot. It's not where he was aiming. The irony of history is that Lincoln is killed by a bad shot. Well, a number of years ago, one of the outstanding scholars, Lincoln scholars, James Randall, writes this article, Has the Lincoln Theme Been Exhausted? Has everything been written about Lincoln in the 1930s that could possibly be written? Well, we know that's not so. Thousands of books have been written since then. There's all kinds of articles, magazine articles, journal historians have written all kinds of learned articles. There's TV programs. There's movies. The Lincoln theme is far from having been exhausted. And just to make a little pun, the theme hasn't been exhausted by a long shot. We still have a lot of people with Lincolnitis. People here, all the people at Ford's Theater, we all experience this particular disorder. Not to worry about it, though. It is one of these kind of positive disorders. It gladdens the heart. It lifts the spirit, makes you a better person for knowing more about this outstanding person in American history. Thank you very much. Do we have time for questions?
We've got time for about 2 questions.
2 questions, okay. Yes, sir.
We need them to go to the
okay.
microphones. We've got a gentleman on that side over there. Want him to go first? Yeah, he's already at the microphone.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Oh,
Given Lincoln's wound, and today,
I'm supposed to
You can stay at the microphone, or
stay at the microphone. I'm a wanderer.
given Lincoln's wound to the brain, today, neurosurgery and emergency care, what would have been his chances for survival today and chances for a recovery?
I have a little section of that in the book. There was a symposium held several years ago in Maryland by some doctors who are expert in treating these kinds of wounds, and speculates that given modern medicine's advances today, that there might have been a good chance of Lincoln surviving had he been shot today. That doesn't mean that he would have not been incapacitated. It means that he would have lived. He still would have had a lot of damage to important parts of the brain. But this is something that has been discussed. And there's an interesting thing also on the internet about another kind of procedure that may also have been used today if the same kind of a wound occurs that might have saved him. Okay, but I do have a section of that in the book which I should have covered. So, yeah.
Interesting commentary about the presidential box not being well lit, and it brought to mind, having worked in theater, that the box looked out over the stage, and the stage would have been the best lit place in the theater. So I'd be interested in your comments on how this plays into it, to the degree to which Lincoln is in silhouette to Booth, if I remember the placement of the door with the light from the stage coming in the box from that direction.
Yeah, he would have probably been in a silhouette, but what you would see in the box, at the back of the box, is another story, because it's going to be, it's unlit. So you're not going to see Booth standing there in the box itself, but you would see that fire coming out of the gun. So you'd know approximately where the placement of the gun is, and it's not going to be behind the silhouette. It's going to be off on the end.
I was thinking of Booth's view of Lincoln.
Well, he may have in fact be able to see him, but what he's going to see, remember, lean over. What do you see? There's not very much of a target. It's a very inaccurate gun, and you're shooting for this, and you're hurrying your shot. Now, there's also a little bit of speculation, if I can just wander off and free associate for a second. Remember, this is a highly theatrical assassination. Booth is an actor, and he's very much into Shakespearean actors, and he's very much into himself as being Brutus and Lincoln as Caesar. And Brutus doesn't shoot Caesar. Brutus stabs Caesar. And I always thought, and I've speculated on this, whether or not the knife is in Booth's right hand, and he is going to try and stab Lincoln, and he has the gun in his left, and that's why he shoots him. That's why, again, it's a lucky shot. Because what does he do? When he's supposed to have the gun in his right hand and his knife in his left. He's supposed to shoot Lincoln and then throw the gun down, switch the knife over here, get over here. That's pretty, a lot of things to do in a very heated moment. When you see somebody coming right at, could drop that knife very easily. I think, speculating again, possibly that he had the knife in his right hand. He was wanted to stab Lincoln. Let's speculate. There's no evidence for this, but that's one outside possibility for a theatrical guy like Booth. Yes, sir.
Again, why was Booth's timing off?
Booth's timing off because he doesn't expect anybody to be in that presidential box at the moment. He's seen Grant is supposed to be there. Okay, he knows that Grant isn't there. He doesn't know anybody else is going to be there.
He has no Rathbones there?
Comes in and he sees the back of Rathbone. He doesn't expect him to be there. What would you do if you're coming into this area, you're ready to shoot somebody, and you see somebody right in front of you? You want to see if there's anybody else there because you got to make your getaway. Okay, his timing is thrown off.
Well, how about you say he entered through door 8 rather than 7? 7 would be right in back of Lincoln.
7 is locked.
Oh, it's locked.
It's locked.
Is there evidence of that?
Yes. Yeah, that box is locked. That door is locked. The door, the lock on box 8 is broken because, remember I said it's a privacy issue, not a security. Somebody has gone through there and broken the lock, and they know it's broken, but they didn't fix it.
So Booth's plan was to enter through door 7.
Pardon?
His plan was to enter through door 7, but it was locked. You didn't know that
No,
part.
Booth knows it.
He knew it. He was always planning to go
Booth
through
is-
8.
Yeah, he's been there earlier that day. He's reconnoitered.
I didn't know that.
The area. So
Okay.
he knows where things are, what's locked, what isn't locked.
Got you.
So
Thank you.
yeah.
Final question, Ernie?
Yes, sir.
She's a doctor, excuse me, Dr. Abel.
Thank you for this excellent presentation, informative. I just greatly appreciate it. You probably had a couple hundred, 300 more here if the Earth Day people knew that this was going on. I live in Prince George's County, 50-50 ribs and feds. So I wonder anybody know the makeup of the audience? Not that that would do it, but you would see why so many people are looking at Lincoln. Number two and last is, it's not surprising that a lot of doctors were there either during or after, but were some of those really just coming after to the house across the street where he was taken?
Yeah, most of the doctors came afterwards. The doctors that were summoned were Dr. Barnes and Dr. Stone. Dr. Stone's a family doctor, no experience whatsoever with battlefield wounds. He's a family doctor. Barnes had been in the Mexican War, and he does have some experience with treating gunshot wounds. But this is kind of a gunshot wound that usually kills people outright, and so you don't really have people experienced enough to treat them. And had they found the bullet, what's the alternative? What would you do if you in fact found the bullet? There's two things. One is what they did was remove the scab so you can drain it, because what's killing him, and I didn't go into that and go into the book, is there's a hernia of part of the brain, impacts on the midbrain, which causes the symptoms that Lincoln has, the breathing and the pulse and things of that sort. But the alternative is to trephine him. Make a hole in the brain and take out the swelling, drain the swelling and take out the bullet. None of these doctors has ever trephined anybody. It's, nobody really survives in this. They don't even have any trephining instruments. There was no point in doing what they were doing, but they do it anyways because, I got to do something. Okay. American medicine is very aggressive. If you go and compare American medicine with European medicine, and people who do the sociologists will tell you, American doctors are much more aggressive in their treatment of patients than our European doctors. The European doctor who is cited most often in terms of gunshot wounds and has the most experience, Dr. Larry, Napoleon surgeon, specifically says, don't do anything if a guy's shot in the head. He's seen a lot of doctors do that, and a lot of doctors have killed their patients when they did it. So the European doctor is much more conservative. American doctor is much more aggressive. Something just a sociological observation.